Hi Paul, thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell us the story of Huggg, how it was kind of conceived, how it came into being?
Yeah, I can try, and I'll try and keep it brief. So the actual background story is was born out of a very kind of boring place, really, but it's blossomed into something a lot more exciting. My background was as a banker, and I had a leverage finance career, which meant that I would write kind of big loans that meant that businesses could change hands. And one of the things that sometimes happened was that a business would go through an IPO, an initial public offering, a listing. And one of the businesses that I was funding at one point was in the greeting card sector. And as part and parcel of the assessment of how risky it was to extend a loan at that time for that business, I was trying to figure out what might disrupt the greeting card industry. And to cut a very long story short, the thought of being able to write happy birthday on the side of an actual cup of coffee and somehow be able to deliver that and it still be hot and not spilled was where it came from in the first instance. And I started working on it in my free time from that very first day.
It's about working in banking, kind of in the finance world. So how would you say that working in the corporate sector differs from working in a startup environment?
It's completely different. And the reason it's different is because of the way people behave inside corporations versus the way you have to behave inside startups. So corporations are very large, very stable, often stable places to work and to be. But in order to get things done, you have to go through so many layers of opinions. And generally speaking, what happens is the excitement to actually get something done is diminished very, very quickly once lots of people start to dilute and chip away at the original idea. So if you like to be a person who gets things done, who has an idea and can follow it through, corporate life is probably not going to be for you, and it's quite frustrating. So for that reason, people tend to move out of corporate life, and that makes the corporate world even less innovative. A startup, on the other hand, is full of people who are working at a very high pace to get things done under great amounts of pressure, but with huge amounts of upside at the same time. It's a very fast-paced environment. It's definitely not for everybody, and it requires a person to have a very, very high coefficient of learning. So you have to be a very fast learner. You have to be able to not do things perfectly all the time as well and be comfortable with that. You are at the point of coming out of university, or even still being in university, you have so much more time on your hands and youth on your side than you really imagine, and you'll only realize that you had it once you've wasted it. But if you want to work, then working in a startup is a great place to be, so long as you're a T-shaped person. And a T-shaped person is someone who is really good at something, at least one thing, but actually is good at turning your hand at lots of different things, because that's exactly what a startup in its first 10 to 15 people needs. It needs T-shaped people who can all just get their hands dirty. It's a great place to be. You'll learn incredibly quickly, but it's a higher risk place than being in a corporation.
So currently the company is only operating in London and in Bristol. So what does Bristol mean for the company? Why choose to operate here?
The type of business that we are is all about generosity, benevolence, etc. If you were to choose a city in the UK that you would start this business in, that would have the people who acted, thought, felt that way, then probably Bristol would be right at the top of your list anyway. However, out of pure coincidence, I happen to live here. My wife is from here, that's why I now live here. And that's why we started to build out the team here. And it's been, building teams is very, very hard, but there is a great talent pool in Bristol, particularly on a technical side.
And so you're talking about the Huggg mantra, which is kind of a kindness, isn't it? Everyday kindness, everyday acts of kindness. And why would you say that that mantra is so important in society today?
So there are a lot of things happening in technology that enhance life. And there are lots of things happening that are destroying people's personal interactions. So if you look at the way a lot of people interact now when they're using messaging or social media, they're finding out about each other from a screen, even when they're in the same room often. Now, the technology that we have written is really a facilitator of some real world experiences. So a few seconds on a phone that facilitates a moment of joy for somebody that takes place on a phone, but where most of that joy takes place half an hour in a coffee shop, for example. So we're trying to do something that bridges the gap between the real world and the digital world in a way that is definitely turning towards the non-destructive augmentation area of technology, not the more destructive addiction to technology. But technology is a great thing, you've just got to harness it in the right way. Now, our mantra is all about kindness, generosity and other things. We just think that that's a nice thing to do because it gives the sender a rush, gives the recipient a rush, and somebody gets some revenue as a part of it. We're not really disrupting anything particular. We can't point to what we damage or who is the... all economic things are a zero-sum game. There's always somebody else losing as somebody else wins, but we can't point to who loses in our equation. We just create a marketplace where everyone smiles.